There is no place that you haven't been. The mountains, the valleys, the places within my soul. You know, there's not a moment you're not by our side. You pulled us from darkness to glorious light. You made a way. You go before us. Lead on, King eternal. Lead on, we will follow your ways, your truth, follow your life forever. You lead on, King eternal. There is no sorrow your peace cannot fill. There is no storm that your word cannot still. We rest in you. There is no power you can't overcome. There is no battle the cross hasn't won. Lead on, King eternal. Lead on, we will follow your ways, your truth, follow your life forever. You lead on, King eternal. Take my life and let it be only for you, only for you. Take my life and let it be only for you, only for you. Lead on, King eternal. Lead on, we will follow your ways, your truth, follow your life forever. You lead on, King eternal. King eternal, we will follow. Lead on, you lead on, King eternal. Greatest love that anyone could ever know, that overcame the cross and grave to find my soul. Until I see you face to face, your grace amazing takes me home. I trust in you. With all I am, I live to see your kingdom come. And in my heart I pray you let your will be done. Till I see you face to face, your grace amazing takes me home. I trust in you. Now we'll live to love you. I will live to bring you praise. I will live a child in awe of you. You are the voice that calls the universe to be. You are the whisper in my heart that speaks to me. Till I see you face to face, your grace amazing takes me home. Trust in you. Yeah, I will live I will live to love you. I will live to bring you praise. I will live a child in awe of you. You alone are God of all. You alone are worthy, Lord. And with all I am, my soul will bless your name. You alone are God of all. You alone are worthy, Lord. You with all I am, my soul will bless your name. The greatest love that anyone could ever know, that overcame the cross and grave to find my soul. Until I see you face to face, your grace amazing takes me home. I trust in you. I will live to love you. I will live to bring you praise. I will live a child in awe of you. I will live to love you. I will live to bring you praise. I will live a child in awe of you. You alone are God of all. You alone are worthy, Lord. And with all I am, my soul will bless your name. You alone are God of all. You alone are worthy, Lord. And with all I am, my soul will bless your name.
For those of us who are here in the Visayas, we would always remember 2021 as the year when we had to live through a dual disaster, a natural calamity in the midst of a pandemic. 2021 was the year when we saw the most number of our friends and families getting sick and dying of the COVID-19 disease. So as if it was not enough that we have been terrorized by a contagious and a deadly disease, we would find our lives further disrupted by a destructive super typhoon. It is easy to understand why anyone would label 2021 to be one of the worst years of their life. But despite of what we may say of 2021 or how we may remember it, we cannot simply deny that God has been gracious and faithful to each one of us in the past year. We would not allow, or we should not allow, the unpleasant and unfortunate events of last year to overshadow our memories of God's goodness, love, and care for us in 2021. Now, focusing too much our remembrance of 2021 on the disease and the disaster will leave us distraught, bitter, and despairing. Of course, we are not to forget that it was an eventful year. But what can be more helpful for us is to reminisce the past instances of God's provision, protection, and care. Remembering what God has been to us in the past year is what would ready us to face the coming year. Recalling what God has been to us in 2021 will prepare and motivate us to become the kind of people that God wants us to be in 2022. Now, much like any transition in life, the start of a new year presents us with limitless possibilities and opportunities. It seems that the door is wide open for all kinds of prospects, dreams, changes, and challenges. But before we immerse ourselves in the sea of change that we now call 2022, I would like us to resolve to become what God has called us to be, that is, to be always grateful and always faithful. The scriptures in the book of Joshua, chapter 24, will challenge us to face transitions in life like a new year with a renewed sense of commitment to God. Joshua chapter 24 will narrate to us the farewell instructions of Joshua to the people of Israel. He is very old by now, around 110 years old. Joshua is one of the only two individuals from the original Exodus generation that left Egypt who had made it to the Promised Land. At this point, he has probably served Israel for more than 70 years. First as the assistant of Moses, and later as Israel's leader in the conquest of Canaan. Now he is now old and tired. Joshua will give his final speech as Israel's leader. The gist of this message is this: be grateful to God and be faithful to God. He is calling on the people of Israel to always remember God's grace and not to forget it, to always be loyal and devoted and not to waver in their faith. In order to challenge them to recommit to God, Joshua would first take them down the memory lane. He would rehearse to the people the major events in Israel's history, from the call of Abraham up to the establishment of Israel in the Promised Land. Joshua would cite these key events in their past so that it would provide the people the grounds by which they would consider the challenge that he was about to give them. Now, the first of these major events is the call of Abraham. Joshua recalled that it was God who initiated the relationship with Abraham. Abraham worshipped pagan gods before God chose him to become the father of the nation of Israel. Joshua mentioned that it was God who also granted Abraham offsprings, beginning with Isaac, followed by Esau and Jacob, and then the sons of Jacob. It was also God who permitted for the family of Jacob to be established in the land of Egypt. When the Egyptians started oppressing the descendants of Jacob, or now known as Israel, God intervened by sending Moses and Aaron, by afflicting the Egyptians with plagues, and eventually God taking out the nation out of the land. When the Egyptians attempted to pursue the people of Israel as they were leaving, God facilitated their escape by dividing the Red Sea and by destroying the Egyptian army. While in the wilderness, when they were attacked by the armies of the Amorites and the Moabites, God fought on Israel's behalf. When the nations in Canaan tried to prevent Israel from settling in the Promised Land, God drove the nations out of the land. So the inevitable conclusion of this historical summary is that God was behind every success that Israel had in the past. In verses 12 and 13, God would remind Israel by saying, "You did not do it with your own sword and bow, so I gave you a land on which you did not toil, and cities you did not build, and you live in them and eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant." God wanted the people to realize that whatever they are enjoying in the Promised Land, how it was possible for them to conquer the Promised Land, all of it has everything to do with God's help and intervention. It was not Israel's doing at all. God was quite explicit in denying that Israel has anything or has achieved anything by herself. God said that they did not fight the battles that they have won, that they did not work for the land that they now have, that they did not build the cities that they now occupy, that they did not plant the orchards and the vineyards whose fruits they now enjoy. The people of Israel did not bring all this upon themselves. It was all God's doing. At the height of our success, or at the end of our journey, or on the heels of our great accomplishments, we can be deceived into thinking that our talents, our abilities, our grit, and our wisdom contributed greatly to the outcome that we now enjoy. It was not really the preparation, it was not the hard work, it was not luck that determined your success. It was God. If it had not been for God, nothing would have been accomplished. Nothing would have been achieved. It was important for the nation of Israel, as it is with us, to realize that what they have become or what we may have become has everything to do with how God has been good to Israel, with how God has been good to us as well. We are here where we are at now because of all that God has been to us. This realization is foundational to developing a proper perspective of our relationship with God. What God has been to us is the starting point of our love, devotion, and worship. In this farewell speech, Joshua will point out that what God has been to Israel is directly related to what God expects from Israel as his people. In verses 14 and 15, Joshua challenged the people to make up their mind about God, saying, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your ancestors' worship beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors whom they served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in the land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." In other words, Joshua is saying that if, upon careful consideration, Israel would arrive at the conclusion that it was God who has brought them into the Promised Land, then they should understand why God would require absolute devotion from them. If Israel can recognize God's faithfulness to them, then they should properly respond by fearing and serving God. The expression fear the Lord does not mean quaking or cowering in terror or dread. The verb fear here has the sense of reverence, a reverence of respect that leads to devotion and obedience. So to fear the Lord is to reverently recognize the magnitude of God's demands. He is to be approached in the same manner as a subject would approach a king. The expression serving the Lord or to serve the Lord could mean two related things in this context. One, it could point to the inward devotion of a person to God. To serve God is to be absolutely devoted or committed to God. Two, it could refer to the outward actions or performance of religious acts of a person. In the Old Testament, the performance of religious ritual is a way of serving God. In this context, serving the Lord is related to the ceremony of destroying idols. So, serving the Lord is as an inward devotion is expressed in an outward action of getting rid of the idols. The commands to fear the Lord and to serve the Lord point to the same decisive choice that God is expecting as a response from those who have experienced His grace. So the key to eliciting this response is learning to always discern and be grateful for all of God's help and involvement in our life. If we are mindful of God's grace in our life, we will find reverence and service to be the natural outflow of such grateful recognition. In verse 15, Joshua would clarify that the people will not be forced to serve God at all. They can choose differently if they decide to do so. Joshua would say that if Israel thinks that God is not a viable option for them or that God is a less appealing choice for them, they still need to make their choice clear. If they are decided in serving God, they should do so by throwing away their idols. In this case, being indecisive is already an indication of their choice against serving God. So as to show himself as an encouraging example, Joshua would publicly proclaim his intention to continue serving God together with his household. Joshua would declare, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." So in his twilight years, in his last remaining days on earth, Joshua would reaffirm his commitment to stay loyal and committed to God. For the people of Israel, the call was to remember what God has been to them and to follow that remembrance with an undivided commitment to serve God. As for us, the challenge is to learn to recognize God's gracious acts in our life and to respond in devotion and commitment to Him. So as we usher in the new year, let us do so with a deep sense of gratitude for all that God has been to us in 2021. Let us make 2022 different by learning to thank God every day. Mark each day with gratitude. For every day that God makes is an opportunity for us to experience His grace. So as we learn to be always thankful, we will find our hearts filled with every bit of motivation to be faithful to God. Gratitude is what underpins our devotion to God. Our commitment proceeds from our experience of God's grace in our life. So, a thankful heart would freely want to serve God. With a grateful heart, we can properly focus our thoughts on God and keep our faith steady, regardless of what we may encounter in life. Start this year with a resolution to choose God, to choose to become the person that God wants you to be. Someone who is always grateful for God's grace and always faithful in devotion and service to Him.